I signed everything over to her, the house, the car, even changed my will. I thought we were building a future together. But the morning I woke up and she was gone, I realized I'd been building her escape plan, not our life. I'm 72 years old, and I'm starting over with nothing because I loved someone who never loved me back. I saw her at the night market in Chiang Mai on a Tuesday evening in March. I wasn't looking for anyone. I wasn't even looking for myself anymore. I'd come to Thailand 3 weeks earlier because my house in Albuquerque had become a tomb. 5 years since Linda died, and I still couldn't sit in the living room without seeing her knitting on the couch. My daughter Carmen kept calling, asking if I was okay, and I kept lying. So I bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. Everyone said it was beautiful. Everyone said it was cheap. Everyone said you could start over there. I didn't know what I was starting over from. I just knew I needed to be somewhere that didn't smell like her perfume. The market was loud and bright, full of tourists and locals selling everything from silk scarves to fried insects. I was walking past a food stall when I heard her voice. "You look lost." I turned around. She was standing there with 2 plastic bags of fruit, smiling at me like she'd known me her whole life. She was small, maybe 5'2", with long black hair pulled into a ponytail. She wore a simple white dress and sandals. She looked like she belonged there, and I looked like exactly what I was. A lonely old man wandering through a foreign country, trying to forget. "I'm not lost," I said, "just looking around." It was a soft, genuine laugh that made me feel like I'd said something clever instead of something defensive. "You want company?" she asked. "I just finished work. I can show you good places to eat." I should have said no. I should have told her I was fine on my own. But I hadn't had a real conversation with anyone in 3 weeks. And she had kind eyes, so I said yes. We walked through the market together, and she pointed out stalls I'd walked past a dozen times without noticing. She bought me mango sticky rice from a woman she called Auntie, and we sat on a plastic stool at a corner noodle stand. She told me her name was Wifada, that she worked at a hotel doing housekeeping, that she'd lived in Chiang Mai for 8 years after leaving her village near Udon Thani. She asked me questions about America, about New Mexico, about my life, and I talked. God, I talked more that night than I had in months. She listened like every word mattered. She touched my arm when I told her about Linda. She looked sad for me, and that made me feel seen in a way I'd forgotten existed. "You seem like good man," she said as we were finishing our noodles. "Good heart, I can tell." I didn't know what to say to that. I just smiled. She smiled back. Then she said, "You have my number. You call me tomorrow. I show you temple. Very beautiful. You like it." I took her number. I told myself I wouldn't call. But the next morning, sitting alone in my hotel room, I sent her a message. "What time should I meet you?" She replied in 30 seconds. "I'm already excited." That's how it started. With mango, sticky rice, and a woman who made me feel like I wasn't invisible anymore. I was 72 years old, and for the first time in 5 years, I felt something other than empty. I didn't think about the age gap. I didn't think about why a beautiful 35-year-old woman would want to spend time with me. I just thought about how good it felt to matter to someone again. The next 3 months were the happiest I'd had in years. Wifada and I saw each other almost every day. She'd finish her shift at the hotel around 2 in the afternoon, and I'd be waiting outside with coffee and something sweet from the bakery she liked. We'd spend the rest of the day together, walking through temples, eating street food, sitting by the river talking until the sun went down. She taught me Thai phrases, laughing every time I mispronounced something. I taught her card games my father had taught me when I was a kid. She always let me win. I knew she was letting me win, but I didn't mind. She told me about her life growing up in Isan, about rice fields and water buffalo, and a childhood that sounded both harder and simpler than anything I'd known. She told me her father died when she was 12, that her mother still lived in the village, that she sent money home every month to help her younger brother finish school. Family very important in Thailand, she said one evening as we sat on a bench overlooking the city. We take care of each other, not like America. In America, everyone alone. I thought about Carmen, about how I'd pushed her away after Linda died, about how I'd stopped answering half her calls. Yeah, I said quietly. I guess you're right. She cooked for me sometimes, in the small apartment she shared with 2 other hotel workers, pad thai and green curry and soups I couldn't name but ate anyway because she'd made them for me. She'd watch me eat with this proud little smile on her face, and I'd tell her everything was delicious even when it was so spicy my eyes watered. She'd laugh and say, "You lie, but thank you." Then she'd kiss my cheek and I'd feel like I was 25 again. But it wasn't all romance and temple visits. About 6 weeks in, she started mentioning small problems. Nothing dramatic, just life things. Her phone broke, and she couldn't afford a new one. Her mother needed medicine for her blood pressure. Her brother's school fees were due and her paycheck hadn't come through yet. Each time, I helped. $200 here, $300 there. It didn't seem like much. I had my pension and my savings, and what was I going to spend it on? I was living in a country where a good meal cost $3, and seeing the relief on her face when I told her not to worry about paying me back, that was worth more than any money. One night, as we were walking through the old city, she stopped and turned to me. "Eugene, can I ask you something?" Her voice was serious. My heart jumped a little. "Of course," I said. She looked down at her hands. "You think about staying here? In Thailand? Not just visit?" I hadn't actually. But standing there in the warm night air, holding hands with a woman who made me feel alive again, it suddenly seemed obvious. "I've thought about it." I lied. "Why? Do you want me to stay?" She looked up at me with those dark eyes that always seemed to see straight through me. "I want you to be happy. If you stay, maybe I can make you happy. Maybe we can be happy together." My chest felt tight. I hadn't cried since Linda's funeral, but I almost cried right there in the middle of a Chiang Mai sidewalk. "I'd like that," I whispered. She squeezed my hand. "Me too." The next day, I called Carmen. I knew she wouldn't understand, but I needed to tell someone. "Dad, I've been trying to reach you for 2 weeks," she said when she answered. She sounded stressed. "I'm fine," I said. "I've just been busy. Listen, I need to tell you something. I met someone." There was a long pause. "You met someone? In Thailand?" I could hear the skepticism in her voice. "Her name is Wifada. She's wonderful, Carmen. She makes me feel like myself again." Another pause. "Dad, how long have you known her?" I did the math. "About 3 months," Carmen sighed. 3 months. "Dad, you don't know this woman. You don't know anything about her." I felt my jaw tighten. "I know enough. I know she cares about me. I know she doesn't look at me like I'm some broken old man who can't take care of himself." That came out harsher than I meant it to. Carmen went quiet. Then she said, "I'm worried about you. That's all. Just be careful." I told her I would be, but I had no intention of being careful. Careful was lonely. Careful was sitting in an empty house in Albuquerque waiting to die. This, whatever this was with Wifada, felt like living. A week later, I told Wifada I loved her. We were having dinner at a small restaurant near her apartment. She'd just finished telling me a story about her childhood, something funny about her brother getting chased by a rooster. She was laughing, and I was watching her laugh, and the words just came out. "I love you." She stopped laughing. Her face went soft. "You mean that?" she asked. "I mean it," I said. She reached across the table and took both my hands in hers. "I love you too, Eugene. I love you so much." And right then, sitting in a restaurant in Thailand at 72 years old, I believed her. I believed every word. I proposed to Wifada at Doi Sathep Temple during sunset 2 weeks later. I'd bought a simple gold ring from a jewelry shop in the old city. Nothing fancy, just something that felt right. We'd climbed the 300 steps up to the temple, and she'd held my hand the whole way, laughing every time I had to stop to catch my breath. "You okay, old man?" she teased. "I'm fine," I panted, just pacing myself. At the top, we stood looking out over the city as the sun started to sink behind the mountains. The temple bells were ringing. Monks were chanting somewhere inside. It felt sacred. It felt right. "Wifada," I said, turning to face her. My hands were shaking. She noticed. "What's wrong?" she asked, concerned. "Nothing's wrong," I said. "Everything's right. For the first time in a long time, everything feels right." I pulled out the ring. Her eyes went wide. "I know I'm old. I know I'm not what you probably imagined when you thought about getting married. But I love you, and I want to spend whatever time I have left making you happy. Will you marry me?" She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the ring, then at me, then back at the ring. For a terrible moment, I thought she was going to say no. Then she started crying. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I marry you." She threw her arms around me, and I held her while she cried into my shoulder. I felt like the luckiest man alive. We sat on a bench near the temple for an hour, making plans. She wanted a small ceremony, just close friends and family. I agreed. She wanted to live in Thailand, not America. That was fine with me. She mentioned, almost offhandedly, that it would be nice to have a house, somewhere we could really build a life together, not an apartment. A real home. We could design it ourselves, she said, her eyes lighting up. Make it exactly how we want. A place that's ours. I loved the idea. I'd spent my whole life building things for other people. Building something for us, for Wifada, felt like the perfect way to start this new chapter. "Let's do it," I said. "Let's build our dream house." She kissed me. "You make me so happy," she said, and I believed her. That night, I called Carmen again. I knew I had to tell her before I started making real plans. "Dad," she answered. She sounded tired. It was morning in Colorado. "Carmen, I need to tell you something. I asked Wifada to marry me. She said yes." Silence. Then, "You've known her for 3 months." It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "I know how long I've known her," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "And I know what I'm doing." Carmen laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Do you, Dad?" "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you met a woman half your age in a foreign country, and now you're rushing into marriage without thinking it through." I felt my temper rising. "I've thought about it plenty. I'm not some senile old man who can't make his own decisions." Carmen's voice softened. "I didn't say that. I'm just worried. Have you talked about finances? About property?" But I didn't want to admit that. "We'll figure it out," I said. "We're partners. Partners figure things out together." Carmen tried a different approach. "Dad, listen to me. In Thailand, foreigners can't own land. If you buy property, it has to be in a Thai national's name. Do you understand what that means? It means if you buy a house and put it in her name, you don't legally own anything. If things go south, you have no protection." I felt defensive. "Things aren't going to go south. Why are you assuming the worst?" Carmen sighed. "I'm not assuming the worst. I'm just asking you to be smart. Get a prenup. Keep your assets separate. Protect yourself." I was done with the conversation. "I'm 72 years old, Carmen. I don't have time to be paranoid. I love her. She loves me. That's all that matters." Carmen went quiet. Then she said, "Okay, Dad. I hope you're right." We said goodbye. I told myself she was just being overprotective. I told myself she didn't understand. But a small part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, wondered if she had a point. I pushed the doubt away. 2 days later, I put my house in Albuquerque on the market. It sold in 3 weeks for more than I expected. Suddenly, I had nearly $400,000 in the bank, more than enough to buy land, build a house, and live comfortably for the rest of my life. When I told Wifada, she was ecstatic. "We can start looking for land," she said, pulling out her phone. "My brother Somkid, he knows good lawyer, can help us with paperwork. Make sure everything legal and correct." I'd never met Somkid, but I trusted Wifada. "Okay," I said, "let's talk to him." She kissed me. "You won't regret this, Eugene, I promise. We're going to be so happy." I moved to Thailand permanently in June. I gave up my apartment lease, sold most of my furniture, and packed my life into 3 suitcases. Carmen helped me, even though I could tell she disapproved of everything I was doing. "Promise me you'll be careful," she said as we loaded my bags into her car for the drive to the airport. "I promise," I said. She hugged me tight. "I love you, Dad. Call me when you land." I told her I would. On the plane, I felt a mix of excitement and terror. I was 72 years old, and I was starting completely over in a country where I barely spoke the language. But Wifada was waiting for me. That made it all worth it. The first month was a blur of activity. Wifada and I looked at properties all over the outskirts of Chiang Mai. We found a beautiful piece of land about 20 minutes outside the city, surrounded by rice fields and mountains. It was quiet, peaceful, perfect. The asking price was $40,000. I paid in cash. Wifada's brother Somkid helped us with the paperwork. He was 28, friendly, always smiling. "Don't worry, brother Eugene," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. "I make sure everything correct. No problem." The land went into Wifada's name. The lawyer, Mr. Narong, explained that was the only legal way. "Thai law very clear," he said in careful English. "Foreigner cannot own land, but you can build house. House can be in your name. Land must be Thai national." I signed the papers. Wifada squeezed my hand. "We're doing it," she whispered. "We're building our home." Construction started in July. We hired a local contractor who Somkid recommended. Wifada was involved in every decision: the layout, the tiles, the paint colors. She'd show me samples and ask my opinion, but I could tell she'd already decided. I didn't mind. This was her country, her culture. I wanted her to feel like it was truly her home. I was just happy to be part of it. We visited the site almost every day, watching the foundation go in, the walls go up, the roof take shape. I took pictures at every stage. I sent them to Carmen, who replied with short messages. "Looks nice, Dad. Be careful. Love you." I could feel the distance between us growing, but I told myself it was temporary. Once everything was settled, once I'd proven this was the right choice, things would get better. Somkid started coming around more often. He'd show up at our temporary apartment with his hand out, asking for money for one thing or another. His motorcycle broke down, and he needed repairs. His girlfriend was pregnant and needed a doctor. He owed money to a friend and couldn't pay it back. Each time, Wifada would look at me with apologetic eyes. "I know he asked too much, but he's family. In Thailand, we help family." I'd give him money, $200, $500. Once, 1,000 for something vague about a business opportunity. He'd thank me profusely, call me big brother, promise to pay me back. He never did. But Wifada always thanked me. She'd kiss me and tell me I was a good man, and that made it okay. Her mother, May, visited in August. She was a tiny woman, maybe 4'10", with gray hair and a shy smile. She spoke almost no English, so Wifada translated. "She say thank you for taking care of her daughter," Wifada told me. "She say she very happy you together." I gave May money for her medicine and a little extra for whatever she needed. She bowed to me with tears in her eyes. Wifada hugged her mother, then hugged me. "You're a blessing," she whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words carried me through the next few weeks. even when things started feeling off. Wifada was on her phone more. A lot more. She'd be texting during dinner, scrolling through something while we watched TV, taking calls and walking into the other room to talk privately. When I asked who she was talking to, she'd say it was her mother or her friends from work or people about the house construction. Just boring stuff, she'd say, waving her hand dismissively. Nothing important. I wanted to believe her, but something in her voice had changed. She seemed distracted, distant, like her mind was somewhere else even when her body was sitting next to me. One night, I tried to talk to her about it. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "You seem stressed." She looked at me, surprised. "I'm fine." "Why, you ask?" I shrugged. "You just seem like something's on your mind." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm just thinking about house, making sure everything perfect. I want you to be happy." I told her I was happy. She kissed my forehead. "Good, that's all I want." The house was finished in October. It was beautiful. 2 bedrooms, an open kitchen, a large covered patio looking out over the rice fields. Everything we'd planned, everything we dreamed about. We moved in on a Saturday. Some kid helped us carry boxes. Some of Wifada's friends from work came by with food and drinks. We had a little party. Everyone was laughing and talking in Thai, and I sat on my new patio drinking beer, feeling proud. I'd built this. Well, I'd paid for it. But it was mine. Ours. Our future. That night, after everyone left, Wifada and I sat on the patio watching the stars. "Are you happy?" I asked her. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Very happy," she said, but her voice sounded sad. I didn't understand why. I didn't understand a lot of things that were about to happen. The first fight happened 2 weeks after we moved in. I'd woken up to find Wifada already dressed, putting on makeup in the bathroom. "Where are you going?" I asked, still half asleep. "Out," she said without looking at me. "With who?" I asked. She turned to me, irritated. "Why, you always ask so many questions." "I go see friend. Is that okay with you?" Her tone surprised me. She'd never spoken to me like that before. "I was just curious," I said carefully. "You didn't mention anything yesterday." She grabbed her purse. "I don't need your permission, Eugene. I'm not a child." Then she left. I sat on the edge of the bed, confused. When she came home 6 hours later, she was sweet again. She apologized, said she'd been stressed, that she didn't mean to snap at me. I accepted the apology. But something felt wrong. It kept happening. She'd disappear for hours, sometimes whole afternoons, without telling me where she was going. When I asked, she'd get defensive. "You don't trust me?" she'd say, her eyes narrowing. "After everything, you think I'm doing something bad?" I'd backtrack immediately. "No, of course not. I just worry about you." She'd soften then, come sit next to me, take my hand. "I know you worry, but I'm fine. You need to trust me." I wanted to trust her, but the evidence kept piling up. I found receipts in her purse one day while looking for my reading glasses. Expensive restaurants I'd never been to. A hotel room in Chiang Mai. When I asked her about it, she said it was for her friend's birthday party. We rent room to get ready and leave bags. That's all. It was a reasonable explanation, but something about the way she said it felt rehearsed. I started noticing other things too. The way she'd turn her phone face down whenever she set it on the table, the way she'd get calls late at night and step outside to answer them, the way she'd come home and head straight to the shower without kissing me hello first. I told myself I was being paranoid. Carmen's warnings had gotten into my head. I was seeing problems where there weren't any. But at night, lying in bed while Wifada slept next to me, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing her, or maybe I'd never really had her to begin with. One evening, I went to a bar in town. I needed to be around people, to hear English, to feel less alone. That's where I met Tom. He was an American expat, about my age, sitting at the bar nursing a beer. We started talking. He'd been living in Thailand for 12 years. He'd married a Thai woman 10 years younger than him. They'd built a house together. She'd left him after 3 years, taking the house with her. I put everything in her name, Tom said, staring into his beer. The land, the house, even the car. She was my wife. I trusted her. He laughed bitterly. Then one day I came home and all her stuff was gone. I called her. She said she didn't love me anymore. Said she needed to think about her future. 3 days later, I got papers saying the house was being sold. I didn't even know you could do that. Just sell someone's home out from under them. I felt sick listening to him. What did you do? I asked. Tom shrugged. What could I do? It was all legal. She owned it. I fought it for 6 months. Spent 10 grand on lawyers. Got nowhere. Eventually, I gave up. Now I rent a studio apartment, and I work teaching English just to get by. He looked at me. You married to a Thai woman? I nodded. Building a house together? I nodded again. Tom drank his beer. I hope your story ends differently than mine, he said. I really do. But watch yourself. I'm not saying all Thai women are the same. I'm just saying love makes you blind. And when you're blind, you don't see the cliff until you're already falling off it. I went home that night shaken. Wifada was asleep. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom, watching her breathe, and I thought about Tom's story. I thought about all the little red flags I'd been ignoring. I thought about Carmen's warnings. I thought about the fact that everything we owned was in Wifada's name. The land, the house, the car we'd just bought. Legally, I own nothing. I climbed into bed, but I didn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself that Wifada was different, that our love was real, that Tom was just a bitter old man who'd had bad luck, but the doubt was there now, growing in my chest like a tumor, and I didn't know how to cut it out. I came home early on a Wednesday afternoon. I'd gone into town to run errands, but I'd forgotten my wallet and had to turn back. The house was supposed to be empty. Wifada had said she was visiting her mother for a few days, but when I pulled into the driveway, there was a motorcycle parked under the carport, a nice one, expensive. I walked into the house and heard voices coming from the bedroom. Laughter. I froze. Then I walked down the hall and pushed open the door. Wifada was sitting on the bed, fully dressed, talking to a young Thai man I'd never seen before. They both jumped when they saw me. Eugene, Wifada said, standing up quickly. What are you doing here? I looked at the man. He was maybe 30, good-looking, wearing designer jeans and a polo shirt. He smiled at me. Sawadee krap, he said, giving me a polite bow. I didn't bow back. Who is this? I asked Wifada. She laughed, but it sounded forced. This is Precha, my cousin, from Bangkok. I told you about him, remember? I didn't remember. What's he doing here? I asked. I thought you were visiting your mother. Wifada glanced at Precha, then back at me. I come back early. Precha was passing through, so he stopped to say hello. We just talking, catching up. It sounded reasonable, but nothing felt reasonable. Precha said something to Wifada in Thai. She laughed. They had the easy comfort of people who knew each other well. Too well. Nice to meet you, Precha said to me in accented English. Wifada talk about you a lot. You very generous man. Then he said something else to Wifada, and she walked him to the door. I heard them talking quietly in the living room. Then the front door opened and closed. The motorcycle started and drove away. Wifada came back into the bedroom. You're being rude, she said. He's family. I wanted to believe her, but my gut was screaming at me. How is he your cousin? I asked. I've never heard you mention him before. She rolled her eyes. Because I have a lot of cousins, Eugene. I don't tell you about everyone I know, She walked past me to the bathroom. I need to shower. The door closed. I stood there, frozen. Then I did something I'd never done before. I picked up her phone from the nightstand. I knew her passcode. I'd seen her type it in a dozen times. My hands were shaking as I opened her messages. I scrolled through. Most were in Thai, which I couldn't read. But I found Preetcha's name. I clicked on it. There were photos, lots of them, selfies of them together, dinner photos, a picture of them at a beach. The timestamps went back months, before we'd even started building the house. I scrolled further. The messages were in Thai, but I could make out enough to understand. There were heart emojis, kissing emojis. I opened the translation app on my own phone and started copying messages. I miss you. When is the old farang leaving? Soon. Be patient. I love you. I love you too. Each message was a knife in my chest. I heard the shower turn off. I put her phone back on the nightstand exactly where it had been. Wifada came out wrapped in a towel. Feel better? I asked. My voice sounded dead even to my own ears. Much better, she said, smiling. She didn't see the look on my face. Or maybe she did and didn't care. That night, I waited until she was asleep. Then I went into the living room and sat on the couch with my head in my hands. I thought about confronting her right then. I thought about screaming, about demanding answers, about throwing her out of the house. But it wasn't my house. It was hers. I'd given her everything. I'd signed it all over because I loved her and trusted her and believed she felt the same way. I'd been such a fool. I grabbed my phone and booked a room at a hotel in town. Then I went into the bedroom and started packing a bag. Wifada woke up. "What are you doing?" she asked. Groggy. "I'm leaving," I said without looking at her. "What? Why?" She sat up, suddenly alert. "Eugene, what's wrong?" I turned to face her. "Who is Preetcha?" I asked. "I told you. He's my cousin." I shook my head. "Don't lie to me anymore. I saw the messages. I saw the photos. He's not your cousin." She went pale. Then her face hardened. "You go through my phone?" she said, her voice rising. "You have no right to do that." I laughed. It was a harsh, bitter sound. "I have no right. I built this house for you. I gave you everything. And you're sleeping with someone else." She stood up. "I'm not sleeping with him. We're just friends." I stared at her. "You think I'm stupid? You think I can't see what's happening here?" She started crying. "Eugene, please. You don't understand. Preetcha is from my past. Before you. Yes, we dated. But it's over. I love you. I chose you." I wanted to believe her so badly, but I couldn't. "When is he leaving?" I quoted back one of the messages I'd read. "That's what you asked him, isn't it? When is the old farang leaving?" She wiped her eyes. That was a joke. "We were joking." I picked up my bag. "I'm going to a hotel. Don't call me." She grabbed my arm. "Eugene, please, don't do this. We can talk about it. We can work through this." I pulled away from her. "There's nothing to work through. You used me. You never loved me. You just saw a lonely old man with money, and you took advantage." She was crying harder now. "That's not true. I do love you. I made a mistake, but I love you." I walked out. She followed me to the door, begging me to stay, to listen, to understand. But I got in the car and drove away. She called 12 times that night. I didn't answer once. I stayed at the hotel for a week. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I just lay in bed replaying every moment of our relationship, looking for the truth underneath all the lies. Carmen called. "Dad, I haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. Are you okay?" I told her everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I'm so sorry, Dad. What are you going to do?" "I didn't know. I can't just walk away," I said. "Everything I have is in that house. If I leave, I have nothing." Carmen's voice was gentle but firm. "You need to talk to a lawyer. Find out what your options are. And Dad, you need to be prepared for the possibility that you might lose everything. The thought made me feel sick, but I didn't do anything. I just stayed in that hotel room, frozen, unable to move forward or backward. Then, on the 7th day, Wifada showed up. She knocked on the door. I opened it. She looked terrible. Her eyes were red and swollen. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry, Eugene. You're right. I lied. Precha and I, we have history. But I ended it. I swear I ended it when I met you. He came back because he wanted me to leave you, to be with him. But I said no. I told him I'm with you now. I love you." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. "Why should I trust anything you say?" I asked. She looked up at me with those dark eyes that had once made me feel like the luckiest man alive. "Because I'm telling you the truth now. No more lies. I know I hurt you. I know I broke your trust. But please, give me a chance to fix this. Come home. We can start over." I sat down next to her. I was so tired. Tired of being angry. Tired of being alone. Tired of trying to figure out what was real and what wasn't. "If I come back," I said slowly, "things have to change. No more secrets. No more precha. No more disappearing without telling me where you're going." She nodded eagerly. "Yes, I promise. Anything you want." I knew it was a mistake even as I agreed, but I went back anyway. The first few days were okay. Wifada was attentive, loving, apologetic. She cooked my favorite meals. She stayed home. She showed me her phone whenever I asked, but I couldn't relax. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. It dropped on the 4th day. Wifada came to me with a folder of papers. "I need you to sign these," she said. "What are they?" She smiled. "Just paperwork for the car. Tax stuff. Some kids say we need to transfer title or we pay more money." I started reading through them. They were in Thai. "What do they say exactly?" I asked. She seemed annoyed. "I just told you. Tax paperwork. Why you always so suspicious now?" I looked at her. "Because you lied to me. Because I don't know what to believe anymore." She started crying. "I knew you wouldn't forgive me. I knew you would never trust me again. Why did I even try?" I felt guilty immediately. That was her gift, making me feel like the bad guy even when I had every right to question her. "Okay," I said, taking the pen. "Where do I sign?" She showed me. I signed. She kissed my cheek. "Thank you. I'll take these to some kid tomorrow." I didn't think about it again until 2 days later when my phone rang. It was Mr. Narong, the lawyer. "Mr. Eugene, we need to talk. Can you come to my office?" Something in his tone made my blood run cold. "What's this about?" I asked. "It's better to talk in person," he said. I drove to his office in town. He sat me down and pushed a document across the desk. "The house on your property was sold yesterday," he said. "Title transferred to new owner." I stared at him. "That's impossible. I didn't sell anything." Mr. Narong looked uncomfortable. "The property was in Mrs. Wifada's name. She had legal right to sell." I couldn't breathe. "She sold our house?" Mr. Narong nodded. 2 days ago. The paperwork you signed, it was authorization to transfer ownership. I received copy this morning. I'm very sorry." I drove back to the house in a daze. When I got there, it was empty. All of Wifada's things were gone. The furniture was still there, but her clothes, her photos, everything that was hers had vanished. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again, and again, and again. On the 10th call, she picked up. "What do you want, Eugene?" Her voice was cold. "What did you do?" I asked. "What I had to do," she said. "I need to think about my future. You're old. You won't be around forever. I can't wait for you to die to have a life. You sold our house, I said. I could barely get the words out. It's my house, she corrected. You gave it to me, remember? You signed everything over. You have no one to blame but yourself. I felt like I was drowning. Where are you? I asked. Somewhere you'll never find me, she said. Don't call again. The line went dead. I stood in the empty living room of the house I'd built, the house I'd poured my savings and my heart into, and I realized I had nothing. No home, no wife, no future. I was 72 years old, and I was exactly where I'd started, alone. Except now I was broke too. I found a guest house on the outskirts of Chiang Mai. Cheap, basic, 400 baht a night, about $12. It was all I could afford. I had $800 left in my bank account. Everything else was gone. Sold, transferred, disappeared along with Wifada. I lay on the thin mattress that first night, staring at the water-stained ceiling, and I tried to figure out how I'd gotten here. How had I been so blind? How had I let this happen? I thought about Linda. She'd been smart, careful. She never would have done something this stupid. But she was gone, and I'd been so desperate to not be alone that I'd ignored every warning sign. I'd built a fantasy and convinced myself it was real. Carmen called 3 days later. Dad, your neighbor in Albuquerque emailed me. She said she saw you listed as missing on a Facebook group. Are you okay? I broke down. Right there on the phone, I broke down and told her everything. About signing the papers, about the house being sold, about Wifada disappearing, about having $800 to my name and nowhere to go. Carmen didn't say I told you so. She didn't lecture me. She just listened. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, Dad, I'm wiring you $2,000. Book a flight home. Come stay with me. We'll figure this out together. I can't, I said. I can't take your money. Carmen's voice was firm. You're not taking it. I'm giving it. You're my father. I love you. And you're not going through this alone. I started crying again. I was so stupid, Carmen. I'm so sorry. She was crying too. I could hear it in her voice. It's not your fault. She manipulated you. She used your loneliness against you. That's not on you. That's on her. But it felt like it was on me. It felt like every choice I'd made had led to this moment. Every decision, every signature, every time I'd ignored my gut because I wanted so badly to believe in love. I booked a flight for the following week. In the meantime, I walked around Chiang Mai like a ghost. I went to the night market where I'd first met Wifada. I sat at the same noodle stand. Everything looked the same, but it all felt hollow now. I thought about going to the house, to our house, but I couldn't. I couldn't see it knowing it wasn't mine anymore. Knowing some stranger owned the place I'd imagined growing old in. I met Tom for a beer one last time. Leaving? He asked. I nodded. She took everything, I said. Tom raised his glass. Welcome to the club. There's a lot of us. I clinked my glass against his. How do you live with it? I asked. The anger? The shame? Tom shrugged. One day at a time. You stop thinking about what you lost and start thinking about what you still have. You're alive. You're relatively healthy. That's more than some people get. The night before my flight, I got a message from an unknown number. I almost didn't open it, but something made me click on it. It was Wifhada. I'm sorry it ended this way. You were kind, but I had to think about my future. That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just a cold, matter-of-fact statement. I stared at that message for 10 minutes. Then I deleted it. I deleted her number. I deleted every photo I had of her. I didn't want to carry her with me anymore. I'd carried Linda's memory for 5 years, and it had nearly destroyed me. I wasn't going to do that again. I wasn't going to let Wifada haunt me. She'd taken my money. She'd taken my home. She wasn't taking any more of my life. At the airport, I looked out the window as the plane lifted off. Thailand disappeared below me, green and beautiful and full of broken dreams. I thought about everything I'd lost, but I also thought about everything I'd learned, about loneliness, about desperation, about how easy it is to see what you want to see instead of what's really there. I closed my eyes and thought about Carmen waiting for me in Colorado, about starting over, again, at 72. It should have felt impossible, but somehow, it just felt necessary. Like this was what I had to go through to finally understand that being alone wasn't the worst thing that could happen to you. Being with the wrong person was. I landed in Denver 16 hours later. Carmen was waiting at arrivals. When she saw me, she ran over and hugged me tight. "I'm so glad you're home," she whispered. I hugged her back. "Me too." We drove to her house in silence. She'd set up the guest room for me. Clean sheets, fresh towels, a vase of flowers on the nightstand. I sat on the edge of the bed and felt something break inside me. Not in a bad way. In a relieving way. Like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. "Thank you," I told her. She smiled. "You're my dad. This is what family does." The first few weeks were hard. I couldn't sleep. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning thinking about Wifada, about the house, about all the money I'd lost. Carmen was patient. She'd make me coffee and sit with me in the kitchen, not saying anything, just being there. Slowly, I started to feel human again. I started going for walks. I helped Carmen with projects around her house. I fixed her leaky faucet and built her a bookshelf. It felt good to work with my hands again. It felt good to build something that wasn't going to be taken from me. One afternoon, about a month after I'd come back, Carmen and I were sitting on her porch drinking iced tea. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course," I replied. She hesitated. "Do you regret going to Thailand? Do you wish you'd never met her?" I thought about it, really thought about it. "No," I said finally. "I don't regret it. I regret how it ended. I regret being stupid, but I don't regret trying to find happiness. I just wish I'd been smarter about how I went about it." Carmen nodded. "For what it's worth, I understand why you did it. After Mom died, you were so lost. You needed something. I just wish it hadn't cost you so much." I looked at my daughter. "It didn't cost me everything," I said. "I lost money. I lost a house. But I still have you. I still have myself. That's not nothing." She reached over and squeezed my hand. We sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over the Colorado mountains. It wasn't Thailand. It wasn't the life I'd imagined. But it was real. And after everything, real was what I needed. That night, I got a notification on my phone. A friend request on Facebook. I almost ignored it, but something made me look. It was from Precha, Wifada's cousin who wasn't really her cousin. I clicked on his profile. There, in his recent photos, was a picture of him with Wifada. They were standing in front of a new house, a big house, nicer than the one I'd built. The caption was in Thai, but I translated it. "Our new home, starting our life together." I stared at that photo for a long time. Then I blocked him. I didn't need to see it. I didn't need to know what she was doing with my money, with the life I'd paid for. She'd made her choice. I'd made mine, and mine was to move forward. I thought about Tom's words, about how you stop thinking about what you lost and start thinking about what you still have. I had Carmen. I had my skills as a carpenter. I had my health, mostly. I had the chance to rebuild, even if that chance came later in life than I'd hoped. I wasn't happy. Not yet. But I wasn't destroyed either. I was somewhere in between. Healing, learning, accepting. And for now, I've been living with Carmen for 6 months now. I pay her rent by doing work around the house, and taking odd carpentry jobs in the neighborhood. I built a deck for her neighbor last month, fixed a staircase for someone 2 streets over. It's not much, but it's something. It's mine. Nobody can take it from me. I'm saving money slowly. Maybe in a year or two, I'll have enough to rent my own place. A small apartment, nothing fancy. But it'll be mine, legally mine, and that matters more than I ever understood before. I don't date. People have suggested it. You should try online dating, Carmen said once. There are women your age looking for companionship. I appreciate the thought, but I'm not ready. Maybe I never will be. I'm not bitter about it. I'm just careful now. I've learned the price of not being careful. I've learned what happens when you mistake loneliness for love. I spent 5 years mourning Linda, then 3 months falling for someone who never existed. Now I'm learning how to just be okay with myself. It's harder than it sounds, but it's necessary. I think about Wifada sometimes, not as often as I used to. When I do, I try not to be angry. I could be. God knows I have the right to be. But anger is exhausting, and I'm too old to carry that weight. I think about what Tom said, about how she did what she had to do to survive. I don't know her full story. I don't know what her life was like before she met me. Maybe she really did need that money. Maybe she had debts or obligations I never knew about. Maybe manipulating lonely old men is just how she survives in a world that doesn't give her many options. That doesn't make it right, but it makes it understandable. And understanding it helps me forgive her. Not for her sake, for mine. The hardest part isn't the money. It's the trust. I gave someone everything, and they took it and left. That changes you. It makes you question your judgment. It makes you wonder if you can ever really know another person. I replay the conversations we had, looking for the moment where I should have known, the moment where the mask slipped. But the truth is, she was good, really good. She knew exactly what to say, when to cry, when to smile, when to make me feel like the most important person in the world. She studied me and gave me exactly what I needed, until she didn't need me anymore. Carmen says I shouldn't blame myself. You wanted love. That's not a crime. She took advantage of that. That's on her, not you. I know she's right, but I still think about the signs I ignored. Carmen's warnings, Tom's story, the receipts, the phone calls, the way Wifada would get angry whenever I questioned her. I saw all of it, and I chose to believe the fantasy instead of the reality. That's the part I have to own. I was complicit in my own deception because the truth was too painful to accept. But I'm accepting it now. I'm 72 years old. I have $8,000 in the bank, saved from the work I've been doing. I have a daughter who loves me. I have a roof over my head and food in my stomach. I have stories to tell and skills to share. I'm not the man I was when I stepped off that plane in Chiang Mai. I'm not the man who built a house for a woman who never loved him. I'm someone else now, someone quieter, someone more careful, someone who knows that being alone isn't the same as being lonely. And maybe that's the lesson I was supposed to learn all along. I don't hate Wifada. I don't even miss her. Not really. I miss the idea of her. I miss the way she made me feel in those early days. Seen, wanted, alive. But that was never real. It was a transaction disguised as love. And now that I can see it for what it was, I'm free of it. Free to figure out who I am without Linda's ghost and without Wifada's lies. Just me. Eugene? 72 years old. Broke but not broken. Starting over one more time. And this time, I'm doing it for me. Nobody else. That's the story. That's what happened. Maybe you're lonely and someone is offering you everything you've ever wanted. Maybe it feels too good to be true. Listen to me. It probably is. That doesn't mean you shouldn't take chances. That doesn't mean you should never trust anyone again. But it does mean you should be smart. Protect yourself. Keep your assets separate. Listen to the people who care about you. And most importantly, Learn to be okay on your own first. Because if you can't be happy alone, you'll never be happy with someone else. You'll just be dependent. And dependence is not love. It's desperation. And desperation makes you blind. I see clearly now, maybe for the first time in years. And that clarity, painful as it was to earn, is worth more than any house or any amount of money. It's worth more than the fantasy I built in Thailand, because it's real, and after everything, real is what I needed all along.